Greeting everybody. This is part 2 of our chapter, Teaching and Learning Vocabulary. I hope you have gotten a good introduction to this chapter and have come to expect what it will be about. In this video, we will be looking at the second major focus of this chapter, which is key principles of teaching and learning vocabulary. There are many theories, practices, techniques throughout this, but I'll try to keep them short but meaningful and comprehensible enough for everybody. So let us get started. The first point of this is about meaningful practice. Now you are introduced to a new term in vocabulary teaching and learning, which is called meaningful practice. So, what is it exactly? You may think for a minute. A meaningful practice is not done for the sake of practicing, nor is it about how much practice students do or you give to them. It's not about the quantity, but it is about the quality of the practice that is meaningful. A meaningful practice consists of various engaging activities that help students use the words in various scenarios and contexts, practices that help students understand and memorize the words. So activities such as role play, conversation, storytelling, creating sentences allow students to use the target vocabulary in everyday communication. Now, when it comes to teaching vocabulary, teachers use various techniques, one of which is presentation. One thing you need to remember though, meaningful practice that comes after the presentation will always be more important than the presentation itself. But that doesn't mean that the presentation can't always be meaningful and engaging. So there are many ways teachers can present vocabulary to students. They can use real action or mime using body languages or gestures, facial expressions even, to display the meaning of the word, as you can see here in the picture. They can also draw the picture that represents the meaning of the word. They can even use real objects to demonstrate what the word is to students instead of directly telling students what the word is without actually challenging them to think and come up with their own meaning and understanding using the input we give to them. But there are cases where words or phrases are so difficult and can't be explained using the options mentioned above. That is where teachers have to be flexible. They can actually use their own native language or their L1 to give the translation to students directly. That is not wrong either in vocabulary teaching. Another meaningful way of presenting vocabulary is through context techniques. The first type of context techniques is called the what is it technique. So basically, let's just say we want students to understand or present the word factory to them today. Instead of showing a picture of a factory or using any of the strategies above, you can actually use the what is it technique to present the word. In this technique, you write several sentences containing the target word, which is factory. From general, something that is so general, as you can see here, a factory is usually big, factories are often dirty, which don't really give much for students to work on here. And to something that is so specific, like people make cars in factories, or there is a factory next to our school, for example, if there is one. These should now give them more to try and figure out what we mean by the word factory. As you say or write these sentences out, students will try Or at least you encourage them to try to shout out the meaning of the word. It could be in their L1 or native language, but you don't give them an answer straight away. You give them more chances to think and guess the meaning based on what they see. This is a good way to challenge them to think. For example, students may say, oh, I think the word factory means this. Oh, the factory is that. But you don't say anything yet. You wait until one student says the right thing. Right? That stimulates their responses more, that engages them to think, to try and figure out the answer just based on the clues around the word in each sentence. Another context technique is the concept question technique. This technique is great for checking students' understanding of the words that we have taught them. So how do you normally check students' understanding? Do you ask them questions like, did you understand the word now? Or do you have any questions? What answer do you expect from them? Obviously, it's most likely a no, or they just don't say anything. So instead of asking those questions, you can use the concept question technique. So we just taught the word factory, right? To test their understanding, you can ask questions like, what does the factory make? If they answer cars, shoes, that should determine they know what a factory is. If they answer anything else, then it just shows that they have not gotten a good meaning of the word factory yet. So the context technique can also be used to help students guess the part of speech as well. For example, you want them to know the part of speech of the word generous, right? So you put the word generous in a sentence. He is a generous man. Then you start asking questions like, what kind of man is he? Students may say, generous, teacher. So who does the word generous describe? You continue. Students may say, the man. So what is the part of speech of the word generous? Now you may get some more answers, some more guesses from the students. Another meaningful way of presenting vocabulary is using the matching techniques. This works best when you think the words you are to teach your students can be described using pictures. Basically, you select 5 words, a strawberry, elephants, a house, etc., as you can see on the slide. You write the words on one side of the board. You stick or show the pictures that represent these words on another side of the board. You then select a student to come to the board to point to the picture as you say the word. For example, you say, point to the picture of strawberry. The student may point to the picture of a doctor, which is completely wrong, right? You say it again. Point to the picture of strawberry. Students know now that the doctor picture is not a strawberry and will then move on to the next picture. You do this until they get the picture of the word right. The next student comes, you say a new word and repeat the process until all the words are called. After that, you can, ask them to work on meaningful practices using the target words on the board. Speaking of practices, a lot of techniques can be used for vocabulary practice. One of which is to try and draw their attention, the students' attention, to words in context. So how are you going to do this? For example, you may give students a short text and then you ask them to go through the text and underline any unfamiliar words that they find in that text. And then you ask questions about those words. For instance, what do you think about the word illuminate? What does it mean in this sentence? Now this encourages them to try to infer the meaning from the context. One of the best ways to teach students to try and use the guessing meanings from context strategy in vocabulary teaching. Another technique is to try and get them to work with the lists or groups of words. How are you going to do this? You give them a list of words related to a theme, for example, a job. And then you have students categorize them by using the words under the theme of a job and put them in the correct column. So for example, words like teacher, engineer, or doctor, they are under the theme of a job. So if they can put these words together under this theme, that means they understand what these words mean. And that is a good practice for them to branch out to other words association. You can also have them work on a collaborative task, right? You have students work in pairs to create sentences. Okay, you have them use the words in those sentences that they have learned from the list. This practice helps them a lot, to try and apply the words in context, not just the ones you give them, but also to create by themselves. You can also use games, bingo, matching exercises, or real-life application. Get them to try and use the words they have learned in various activities. Of course, we are going to focus on techniques for vocabulary learning in the next sessions, but for now, this is what we have for the techniques that can be used for vocabulary practice. Of course, these techniques work well with higher, more advanced students, but it depends on the type of students that you are teaching. Another thing about teaching and learning vocabulary that teachers should know is that we should always avoid introducing new grammar at the same time as new vocabulary. For example, you want to teach your students the word run today. It's a new word for them today. At the same time, you put the word in the past simple tense, which students had never even studied before. Now this new word, the word run here, becomes ran. Now that confuses students and does not really allow them to work on the new word enough yet. They are already exposed to another form of that new word, which is ran. So now you have two jobs to work on, and none of the jobs would be benefited from your teaching now because you have two things to focus on. So instead, try to focus on grammar and vocabulary that are already known to students to introduce new words, so that they don't have to worry about understanding the words around the new words. For example, you want to teach students the word travel today. Do you like to travel? That is your sentence, your question. Students now should already know the words do you like to. These words don't give them troubles. So now you can actually focus on just the word travel. You don't have to care about whatever words come before or after the word travel. Students already know them, except for the word travel. After presenting new words to them, teachers can put students in pairs or groups to do more meaningful practices. If they have their own list of words, that is actually even better because they can actually practice more outside. Now, this relates to techniques for vocabulary teaching, and we will touch on them more in detail next week. Sometimes it is actually better to try and transfer new words to various topics. It is good to allow students to use the words they have learned in various topics because we already know that common and simple words are wide range and can be found in many scenarios. For example, they learned the word travel today. You ask them, who do you travel to your hometown with? As in leisure or free time topic kind of way. And then you can also ask them questions like, does your father travel to work by car? As in a business context. So now the word travel is not just for leisure kind of topic, but it can be for transportation.